Hey everyone, please support what I do to help keep Greyhawk alive by subscribing to the channel. Also, please consider becoming a channel member to get early access to videos, exclusive live chats, quarterly adventure modules, and more. Thanks, and enjoy the show. Hey everybody, I was thinking about Castle Greyhawk, the original Gary's Castle Greyhawk as it's presented in the Guide to the World of Greyhawk. And I was curious about the timing. Why did it take so long for people to start finding treasures in the ruins of Castle Greyhawk? And that's what I want to explore today on Greyhawk Grognard. So going through the Castle Greyhawk timeline, there's a couple of interesting things that that kind of show up when you compare dates from entries in a bunch of different places and stuff. And I apologize in advance because this is going to have some, I'm going to be tossing around dates, and the thing you really need to keep in the back of your mind is current year. In terms of when the guide was published is 576. So that's kind of the center point that I'm going to be referring to. Obviously, From the Ashes and The Adventure Begins, push that out later, but for the purposes of this discussion, I'm treating 576 as current year. Now, we got a couple of things here. The castle itself was built by Zagyg in around 375. And this comes from the guide, where in 375 Common Year, Zagyg Yagran built the sprawling Castle Greyhawk, now a ruin, and poured funds into the city to make it the gem of the Flyness. His reign was bizarre in many other ways, and it came as no surprise when it was reported that Zagyg had mysteriously vanished after years of rule with no change or aging could be detected. Now, that happens, we find out, in other places in 421. So, 46 years after the castle's built, Zagyg disappears. And the assumption is that, some sources say that is when he became a demigod. However, that doesn't make sense when you kind of factor in other things that we know about that process. So, between 5 and 10 years after Zagyg disappears, people figure out that he's gone, and there are treasures that are found in the castle dungeons, lots of traps and so forth. So that's like the first era of looting the dungeon, is right after Zagyg is gone, approximately 150 years ago from the present day, from 576. So after that happens, a couple of events that are going to be relevant to the castle happen. And the first is the rise of Ayuz. Ayuz takes over his stepfather's realm in 479. And then he begins to slowly absorb the little tiny petty states around him. And then in either 503 or 505, depending on which source you read, Ayuz disappears. And that is significant because the whole point of Ayuz disappearing is that Ayuz and some other deities were captured by Zagyg in what's known as the God Trap, which is underneath Castle Greyhawk. It was dealt with in specific in Expedition to Greyhawk Ruins, and it's been mentioned in a couple of other places that's what he used to ascend from being an archmage to being a demigod. So it stands to reason that if he didn't have the gods imprisoned in it, he couldn't have ascended to godhood, which brings that earlier date for his apotheosis into question, because he couldn't have become a demigod in 421 if he didn't have the captured gods until 505. So we also know, that also tells us that Zagyg is active in the dungeons. At least he's coming and going, because he is actively in the dungeons in the God Trap, before, after he has disappeared. And presumably while it's being explored by that first wave of looters. So we have this going on, and then suddenly there is another, and at that point, they found some treasures, they found a lot of traps and monsters and stuff, so people just stopped going. But then, in around 560, so 15 years ago, roughly, there's more treasures, and the traps are reset, and there's more monsters, and there's another second wave of exploration of the castle. This presumably is the time period when Gary was running his original campaign, and you have the Citadel of Eight, you have Mordenkainen and Tensor and Robilar, and all those guys are actively exploring the dungeons. And this would, in the timeline as published, that happens around 560. That's when it starts. And it's relatively rapid in terms of how quickly they go up in levels, because we know that in 561, Robilar has built the Green Dragon Inn, so he was only adventuring for a year or two or three before he was able to do all this stuff. In 562, only 2 years later, Fraz Orblu, the demon, the demon lord, is freed from his prison in the castle where he was, he was trapped in the in like a face of a clown in one of the areas, and then in 570, only 16 years ago from present time. Ayuz is freed by Lord Robilar. So what happens is Ayuz is captured in 505, let's call it. He is kept there for 65 years and then is freed by Lord Robilar. And then he goes back to his empire. He reconquers half of it. Half of it's in the hands of the Horn Society, and and the history that we know starts unfolding. The question is, where did all those other treasures come from? All of a sudden, the castle is empty and abandoned for, between 430, call it, and 560. For 130 years, nothing's going on in that castle. Zagyg is there. He's puttering around. He's building the god trap. He's and then in 505, he activates it, captures captures and imprisons the deities, sucks whatever energy he needs to suck out of them into himself, becomes the demigod, Zagyg, and leaves them in the god trap. So, what happened between 505 and 560, those 55 years? Why did Zagyg all of a sudden decide now is the time that I need adventurers to come back into the castle? And we don't have an answer to this. This is complete speculation on my part. But knowing that he is insane, there's no way to get around it. Zagyg is crazy and whimsical and just does stuff for reasons that make sense to him but don't make any sense to anybody else. And I can't help but wonder if the purpose of re-adding more loot and more magic items and more gold and restocking the monsters and all that good stuff, I wonder if that wasn't part of a scheme to let out the gods from the god trap. I wonder, and we know that it wasn't just demigods. There were a lot of some of the lesser deities we know were in there. Gygax did name several of them in one of the Q&As. I didn't think to get it handy, but I believe Farlangen is one of them. There's some of the lesser deities were in there as well, and they all get freed. And that is obviously I'm trying to retrace the steps of a crazy fictional character. But it seems to me that maybe he felt it was time to release the figures from the god trap And for some reason, he didn't want to do it himself. Maybe it was too dangerous for him to do it himself. Maybe, he was very content to let other people stumble on the God Trap and blunder their way through. Maybe he thought that whoever did stumble into it would slay the gods. In fact, that's why Robilar was there in the first place. Supposedly because Mordenkainen kind of subtly aimed him in that direction to kill Ayuz in the God Trap. So maybe that was Zagyig's motive. Maybe he was trying to get the some adventurer to go down into the God Trap. Maybe there's some other feature in the ruins of Castle Greyhawk that Zagyg wanted to be brought into the light. Maybe there was some treasure or something that he needed to attract adventurers so that they could actually overcome it and win it. Maybe it was just boredom. Maybe he was just tired of it being abandoned, and he wanted the sport of seeing all the adventurers come in. But that doesn't explain the timing, other than he's crazy. So anyway, this is just some speculation on my part. I thought it was a neat little excursion into some of the history and the motives and things like that. I would love to hear in the comments. Have you ever done anything with the God Trap that's in Expedition to Greyhawk Ruins? What do you think might be the possible explanation for that 55-year gap between the activation of the God Trap, which in theory is what led to Zagyig's apotheosis, and the renewal of adventuring in the dungeons? I would love to hear your thoughts on the subject. Let me know in the comments. Hope you're having a wonderful day, and stay safe from the Pinkertons. Thanks for watching today's video. Please remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Below you'll find links to my Patreon, which helps make these videos possible. You'll also find the web store where you can buy my books, and my blog where you'll find all sorts of free downloads and other articles. Thanks, and have a great day.